Welcome, welcome. Um, we're certainly winding down. Um, some folks have asked, and I've posted that we will not have a final exam. It's just things are running late.
Listen to this man. He said,
Say what?
"Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize I wasn't muted."
Yeah, for some
That's
reason, this
funny
class
and
defaults
awkward.
to everyone being unmuted.
We've all been there. This is another reason I'm not doing a final exam. It's one more thing to mess up. So we've all had some messy weirdnesses. So yeah. So I'll just do extra credits every week for the remainder. I was telling people before I put on the record button, I should finish up essays this week. The one thing I'm noticing is a lot of people aren't using examples. That you say the New York Times is biased against Republicans, but then you don't use an example. You're just assuming that we all agree that, for example, blah, blah, blah. And I'm seeing a lot of people just doing that. Plus, again, it's useful for me to see that you've all grown up in a world where the media is all biased toward liberals and we're conservatives and we hate the media. I'm not surprised at that, but again, I grew up in a different time.
Of course,
Hmm?
of course, that's not to say conservative-leaning media outlets do exist. You just got to look for them.
How about Fox? How about Breitbart? You don't. How about Rush Limbaugh? I mean, my contention is that the media is too big a word, and I've said this in class. It's like saying
it's a blanket term.
Yeah, when you say media, it's such a broad term. It's like saying society. There are conservative, there's liberal, there's entertainment, there's gaming. It's all media. I know what people usually mean. You're usually talking the networks and CNN and the New York Times and the Washington Post, but that's just a tiny part of what the media is. But anyway, harumph, harumph, harumph. Anyway, consider, but getting more relevant, that we're doing the history of the growth of big media. You know, in the 19th century, you only had print. Then we had broadcasting, and that blew up a lot of things. So we'll do radio today, television on Thursday, get into government and propaganda next week, and then the internet, and we're done. So that's pretty much it. We'll finish up the course pretty much on time, and I'll give you extra credits just to keep your interest up. Anyway, we'll do the share screen. See, I'm just getting you, it's only taken me 3 months to get used to this. Broadcasting, I showed you that movie last time because I think it's really good, obviously, but it shows you that it's personalities, that it is people. It's not just, and our general textbook, it just says it was invented and the technology changed things. But I want to illustrate that it's individuals and, quite frankly, the money people who end up being successful, and that we see that again and again. Anyway, we saw the movie, and again, the strange guy, the promoter, DeForest, who came up with the idea that we could use this instead of point to point to broadcast over a broad horizon. Again, he came up with a great idea that took off. Armstrong, who made it workable, And then Sarnoff, who invented the network, and he became the only successful one. And the only honest guy got shut out and ended up killing himself, which, while dramatic, you know, that's a real example of things that happen in the real world. But anyway, telegraph, we'll go into the, anyway, beginnings, we saw the movie, telegraph and Morse code, and then radio waves and tubes and all of that were discovered by Heinrich Hertz in the 1880s. And it was Marconi who put the radio wave and the Morse code together.
See your potential retirement income in 30 seconds. Guaranteed monthly income for life.
Hi, I'm Dr. Amy Killen. I have my own medical practice, and I've been using Doodly now for a few weeks to create these really fun
With this telegraph, a device invented way back in the mid-1800s, I can communicate with you, even if you're hundreds of miles away. I can update you on stock prices, or the movements of enemy troops, or who's going to the next week on RuPaul's Drag Race. What's harder to do is make you laugh, tell you a long story, sing you this metal song I wrote, or show you this hilarious cat who's terrified of this toy rabbit. It's adorable, trust me. For that more emotional audiovisual mode of communication, let's ditch the telegraph and leverage some basic scientific discoveries about sound, light, and electricity made during the 19th century.
All right.
The telephone, invented in the 1860s and 70s, took personal communication to the next level. Both Scottish-Canadian inventor Alexander Graham Bell and American engineer Elisha Gray created working telephone systems in 1876, and the priority dispute between them is fascinating. But the telephone didn't lend itself to popular entertainment. It was a one-on-one technology, not a way of communicating to the masses. So it wasn't until the invention of commercial sound recorders and motion picture cameras in the late 1800s that you could consume the same media as other people around the globe. And for those devices, we need to head back to the Menlo Park laboratory of Thomas Edison, who was, by the way, also working on the telephone. Edison developed the phonograph, which literally means sound writing, in 1877, shortly before the light bulb and electrical power system that made him famous. Maybe Edison was interested in recording, amplifying, and playing back sounds because he was hard of hearing. He might have imagined alternative strategies for recording that hearing people wouldn't have thought of. Edison's team invented a recording cylinder which offered good sound quality. It worked by vibrating a...
Okay, we've already done that. We'll get to broadcasting. Shortly.
In practice. Edison had better luck post-doll, post-ore separator with moving pictures. As with his other inventions, he wasn't the first inventor, just the one who made a practical commercial system. Today, historians credit French artist Louis Le Prince with the first workable movie camera. In 1888, he created the first known movie, a very short one showing off Roundhay Garden in Leeds. Apparently a very good garden. Haven't seen it myself. Then Le Prince disappeared from a train.
Okay.
Still, he was the self-proclaimed Napoleon of technology. So in the 1890s, Edison and Scottish inventor William Dixon rolled out the kinetograph, the first motion picture camera, which Dixon invented at Menlo Park. Film movie cameras work by taking lots and lots of photographs called frames. When they're...
Yeah, we'll do the history of movies as well. I wanted to get to broadcasting on this, okay.
And everyone's favorite, Professor Welton's boxing cats. Most of these were shot in the first...
Let's get through broadcasting. Okay, here we go.
Maxwell predicted the existence of radio waves back in the 1860s. But German physicist Heinrich Hertz discovered in 1885 that a wire carrying an electric current will radiate or give off electromagnetic waves when it's swung back and forth. That is, he made an antenna. Hertz researched the waves that antenna gave off, becoming the first person to show in an experiment how to make and detect electromagnetic waves. His work led directly to the radio. Today we measure the frequencies of electromagnetic waves in units called hertz. Radio waves, the longest type of electromagnetic wave, are measured in kilohertz, megahertz, or gigahertz. Inspired by Hertz's research, a young Italian inventor-engineer named Guglielmo Marconi worked in the 1890s on how to send telegrams wirelessly. Many people were interested in wireless communication, but it was Marconi who first developed a working system. At home in Bologna, he sent and received the first radio signals. Soon after, Marconi traveled to Britain to commercialize his system. By 1899, he sent the first wireless telegraph signal across the English Channel. And by 1901, he was able to send a single letter, S, across the Atlantic Ocean from England to Newfoundland, Canada. In this humble, sibilant way, radio was born. And so Marconi won the Nobel Prize in 1909. In fact, Nikola Tesla developed a working radio system even before Marconi, but it was Marconi's that took off commercially. That process did take a while. Regular radio broadcasts began in 1920 in Pittsburgh at the 100-watt station KDKA, and the British Broadcasting Corporation created the first radio network in 1922. Radio broadcasts soared in popularity and became profitable thanks to advertising. By 1936, 3/4 of American households owned a radio. Unlike a telephone, a radio worked without laying expensive copper wires, so this invention and the automobile connected cities to rural areas and changed how people consumed music and sports. Radio also became a tool of political propaganda.
Everyone's saying this and hearing the same stuff from all over. So we're listening to the same music and sports. It ties the country together, but seeing the power of this, we get propaganda.
And an indispensable way of communicating important news. The greatest example of this occurred on October 30th, 1938, when Orson Welles directed an adaptation of H.G. Wells's novel, The War of the Worlds, in which terrifying Martians invade Earth and subdue humanity. Some people didn't understand that this was a drama. Maybe they flipped on midway through and mistook the realistic radio announcements for actual news, causing a panic. As radio was taking off, television was invented and built on the infrastructure that was supporting.
Okay, we will do TV later. Come on, got one more here.
Radio. You know, that old dusty thing that sits up at the front of your car or in the corner of your house. Most of us are too occupied with television, our iPods, or video games to really listen to it. But the impact it has had on our world is immense. It all started in 1873 when James Clerk Maxwell showed mathematically that electromagnetic waves could travel through air. Before long, in 1888, Heinrich Hertz demonstrated Maxwell's theory by demonstrating that someone could produce and detect electromagnetic radiation. Then, in 1892, Nikola Tesla used Maxwell's mathematic findings to demonstrate the sending and receiving of radio frequency energy. He proposed that this method could be used for sending and receiving information. But it was Guglielmo Marconi who built the first wireless transmitter in 1896, which was capable of sending signals up to 1.5 miles. He then proceeded to develop the world's first transatlantic radio communication service between Clifton, Ireland, and Newfoundland in 1901. The next evolution in radio technology was the invention of the spark gap transmitter. This device allowed for the production of the first commercially available radio sets, but the spark gap radios were plagued with problems, mainly electrical interference. These were greatly improved with the invention and production of crystal radio sets. The crystal sets were the first widely produced and widely used radio sets in America. These crystal sets were widely used in most American homes by the 1920s. It was the American family's connection to the rest of the country. This was fantastic, but there was still a problem that needed to be fixed. Up to this time, all radio was being broadcast using AM waves. AM stands for amplitude modulation. But the problem was that AM radio is medium range and is prone to be blocked by urban structures. But in 1933, Edwin H. Armstrong invented FM radio. FM stands for frequency modulation. This type of broadcasting method uses a wavelength that is less prone to static and blockage. It also has a longer range. With the invention of FM, radio only needed one more evolution to become what you know today. That last advancement was the transistor radio. The transistor radio had particular advantages over the old crystal sets. The transistor sets were much cheaper than the crystal ones, used less power, had a smaller size, and had a very long lifespan.
So that's a technology.
Radio, you know, that old dusty thing that.
Okay. So, quick overview. Marconi starts it off. Then we had you had radio on the Titanic, and David Sarnoff is there to pick up the signals that dispatched people to save the survivors, including Rose. And that's really one of the sidelights, unintended consequences of the Titanic. Radio became a big thing. Hello. Okay. Again, radio started as point-to-point Morse code. DeForest and Fessenden saw it as a narrow broadcast thing. Broadcasting is the idea of sending out a signal to many people. In the 19-teens, Sarnoff starts RCA, the Radio Corporation of America, which first he made the radios, and then people bought them, and then he gave you through NBC programming to put on them. Did people know they wanted radios? No. He made them and people wanted them. One of the consequences. Radio kills the Victrola. Phonograph sales go down. 1920. KDKA, the first radio station, goes on the air. 1927, the government steps in because everybody is setting up radio stations and all of them want to be 99.1 on the FM dial or the AM, or 66 on the AM dial. And the FCC steps in, the Federal Communication Commission, to organize who gets to use 66 on the AM dial. And part of that is, so they started licensing the radio stations, and you had to get a license. You had to have public service in order to get a license. And that public service started, public service announcements and then radio news. Okay. NBC starts in 1926, CBS in 28. They provide programming for all the radio stations, so you don't have to get your own announcers and things like that. Golden age of radio, 30s and 40s. All of this stuff comes from the radio. Oops. All our modern genres. Come on. It's not letting me get you this. Sitcoms, game shows. I miss Alex Trebek. All of that comes from radio. Westerns, all the genres we still have. Okay, we'll get to this guy, the guy who invented broadcast news, Edward R. Murrow. Throat protection to cigarettes. we have all of this stuff that happens from radio. The politicians get into the act. See if I can, there it is. Politicians get into the act. You have media stars among our politicians. This guy particularly.
Time to start it up, America, with the Ford Built for the Holidays sales event. Offering 90 days payment deferment and 1,000 trade assist cash on Ford Ranger and F-150. That'll make a lot of joy this season. Ford, built for the holidays.
Come on. Anyway, Franklin Roosevelt. I should have played. Franklin Roosevelt would get up and tell everyone, don't worry, the government's not going to fall apart. Keep your money in the banks. Everybody, because you only had only two networks, and it was like this guy was talking to you. He was in your room. So he was very adept. And then we have this guy who invented radio news. He, from North Carolina near here, was a great debater. And he was hired by CBS to narrate the news. There was no guidelines for how to do this. So he set it all up. I want to, here you can listen to him. Well, I had that early. Anyway, let me get. This is, we don't want to have a long one. Okay, here's what I wanted to show you. There's plenty of it.
I'm standing on a rooftop looking out over London. At the moment, everything is quiet. For reasons of national as well as personal security, I am unable to tell you the exact location from which I'm speaking. Off to my left, far away in the distance, I can see just that faint, red, angry snap of anti-aircraft bursts against the steel blue sky. But the guns are so far away that it's impossible to hear them from this location. About 5 minutes ago, the guns in the immediate vicinity.
You're in your room here in Chattanooga. You turn on the radio and he's in London and the Nazis are attacking. And he really put you
working.
there.
I can look across just at a building not far away and see something that looks like a splash of white paint down the side. And I know from daylight observation that about a quarter of that building has disappeared, hit by a bomb the other night.
He was a great writer too. Meanwhile, seeing the power of this, you get these guys who are very smart. They control the media, radio. Control all the movies, the newspapers. You only hear one side of the story. That's all you do. You can guess. Yeah, the Jews are bad. Marxist, communist, anyone who doesn't like us is a communist. This is all you see. And if you only see one side of the story, that's all you know. Obviously, we have some techniques still in use today. Anyway, back to World War II, they kind of stopped a lot of this and to try to fight each other. In broadcasting, NBC got so big that the government split it in two, NBC Red and NBC Blue. Blue becomes ABC. Listenership on the radio declines. And can you guess why? We had something else that Mr. Sarnoff was working on. Television. You know it. Television came in, radio went down. Radio needed something to put on. And you had rock and roll. Why is rock and roll more than just music? I have some stuff here all about, here's just if you ever want to look at them. But why is rock and roll more than just music? Well, look at those guys there. You're a white person living in the Midwest. Whose music do you listen to? You listen to people who look like this. All of a sudden, you have different things. Chuck Berry from St. Louis. Howlin' Wolf from Mississippi. Also from Mississippi. Jerry Lee Lewis. He's a preacher. You get gospel, you get black music. You get great instrumentalist. So it's all this different stuff that people are getting. And of course, that affects the civil rights movement. All of a sudden, black people aren't just those guys who live down the street. They're our musicians. They are the people that we like. 1960s, radio comes back with Armstrong's invention, FM. And people listen to top 40 music. Again, youth culture, hippies. But before then, young people and old people listen to the same music. In the 50s and 60s, you have music that's just for young people. So you start having these generation gaps. 1980s, we get rap and hip hop. Again, voices of the urban environment, makes you aware that there are other people out there. 1980, MTV. All of a sudden, music has to look good. You have to have that look. And we will get to MTV when we do TV. Internet and cable radio come in, and you still get it all over now. Today, rather than broadcasting, we have narrowcasting, niche audiences, podcasts. It's a fragmented audience. We're not all listening to the same music or the same news the way we were in the 1930s and 40s. Different audiences. We use radio for background, but also news. Public, NPR started in 1969. We have WUTC, government subsidized. Some people say the government should not subsidize radio. We'll see. Issues, again, fragmentation of the audience, mechanization. They have what's called Jack radio, where this just this disembodied robot named Jack plays all the music. Economics, advertising, competition from the internet. So it's still with us, but it's all broken up. Okay, so that's the overview of radio. Quick overview. We'll get to television next time. I should get by the end of the week everything, all the things graded, but I just wanted to give you the quick overview of all what happened with radio. Questions? Everything's good. Okay, we will then see you next time. We'll be talking about the quick history of television next time.